Hello, dark friends. We have some special news for you. SpoilerCon registration is opening some additional spots. It will be first come, first served because we only have a few slots that are left available. The cost of registration is $110. Events in Portland, Oregon. Register before the 7th of August. That's the deadline. Sign up as soon as possible if you want to come at spoilercon.org, and we're looking forward to meeting you.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Yeah, I wanted to really just bring up one thing before we started, which is that I want to just basically put out a huge thank you to everyone who supported Timber and his surgery. About a week ago, if you haven't heard, we were playing in the park and he was just running and blew out his ACL. This is the second time he's done it. And so we basically had to go through a pretty big surgery. We went through that last Monday. He got went through a TPLO surgery, if you want to look it up. And we're just going to be doing some rehab for a while. But he's out of commission for about 6 weeks. And I just want to say a huge shout out to Seth Rhodes for setting up the GoFundMe that's really helped me defray the costs of going through the surgery again. It's been a pretty...
That was really sweet.
That was really sweet. You had me, just those of you who donated to the GoFundMe literally had me like sobbing. I checked it for the first time while I was getting breakfast at a bar, and I was like sitting at the bar with tears running down my face and people asking me what's wrong, and I'm like, I'm just so happy. So thank you so much, everybody who's out there who's supporting Timber and me and the recovery process. And he's very unhappy and very drugged right now, but he is getting better, and he'll be running again, hopefully, by the fall. So just want to put that out there and say thank you so much. I really appreciate what you guys are doing, what you've done.
Got a Rand chapter here.
Oh, we got an LTT chapter here.
Hey.
This is really the first, I want to say, easily identifiable LTT conversation in Rand's head. This, I think, is really the book where Robert Jordan was like, all right, he's got a crazy dude in his head. He's got a crazy voice in his head, and he's going to start hearing it now.
Yeah, it's all really obvious. Even Asmodean kind of gives us a little bit of confirmation, but...
Definitely.
Fires of Heaven, Chapter 2, Rhuidean, and our symbol is the dragon. High in the city of Rhuidean, Rand al'Thor looked out from a tall window. Whatever glass might have once been in it was long since gone. The shadows below slanted sharply east. A bard harp played softly in the room behind him. Sweat evaporated from his face almost as soon as it appeared. His red silk coat, damp between the shoulders, hung open in a fruitless bid for air, and his shirt was unlaced half down his chest. Night in the Aiel waste would bring freezing cold, but during daylight, even a breeze was never cool. With his hands above his head on the smooth stone window frame, his coat sleeves fell down to reveal part of the figure, wrapped around each forearm, a golden-maned, serpentine creature with eyes like the sun, scaled in scarlet and gold, each foot tipped with 5 golden claws. Part of his skin they were, not tattoos. They glittered like precious metals and polished gems, seemed almost alive in the late afternoon sun. Those marked him, to the people on this side of the mountain range, variously called the Dragon Wall or the Spine of the World, as he who comes with the dawn. And like the herons branded into his palms, they marked him for those beyond the Dragon Wall too, according to the prophecies, as the Dragon Reborn, in both cases, prophesied to unite, save, and destroy. They were names he would have avoided if he could, but that time was long past if it had ever existed, and he no longer thought of it, or, if he did on rare occasion, it was with the faint regret of a man recalling a foolish dream of his boyhood, as if he were not close enough to boyhood to remember every minute. Instead, he tried to think only of what he had to do. Fate and duty held him on the path like a rider's reins. But he had often been called stubborn. The end of the road must be reached, but if it could be attained by a different way, maybe it need not be the end. Small chance. No chance, almost certainly. The prophecies demanded his blood. Rhuidean stretched below him, seared by a sun still pitiless as it sank toward the craggy mountains, bleak, with barely a sign of vegetation. This rugged, broken land where men killed or died over a pool of water they could step across was the last place on Earth anyone would think to find a great city. Its long-ago builders had never finished their work. Impossibly tall buildings dotted the city, stepped and slab-sided palaces that sometimes ended after 8 or even 10 stories, not with a roof, but with ragged masonry of another half-built floor. The towers soared higher yet, but stopped in jagged abruptness as often as not. Now, a good quarter of the great structures, with their massive columns and immense windows of colored glass, lay strewn as rubble across wide avenues with broad strips of bare dirt down their centers, dirt that had never held the trees they were planned for. The marvelous fountains stood dry as they had for hundreds upon hundreds of years, all that futile labor, the builders finally dying in with their work undone. Yet at times, Rand thought that maybe the city had only begun, so he could find it.
Okay, well, there's a couple of things. One, just to start off, there's a harp in the background, which we know is Asmodean playing as the Gleeman.
Right.
A barred harp played softly in the room. He's definitely trying to think about a way to, he talks about the end of the road must be reached, talking about basically trying to avoid dying. Although it's interesting, the prophecies do demand his blood on the rocks, but they don't demand his death, specifically.
Yeah, I always thought that was kind of a bit of a stretch whenever I think about Rand's thoughts on this. Bleeding doesn't mean dying.
Right.
It seems pretty simple to me.
To me, too. I was always very confused by his conviction that he had to die. I'm like, that's not what the prophecies say. They say you have to bleed.
Right. He just seems convinced.
Mm-hmm. And then I like the impossibly tall buildings are 8 stories. So they need to work on some of they don't really have skyscrapers back then. Steel has made a big, big difference in terms of what we think about as tall buildings. Sometimes ended after 8 or even 10 stories. Wow.
100 feet.
Yeah. And then one other point, like he said the fountains stood dry as they had for centuries. I was going to say, except for the one that you channeled water into when you were here. Remember that? He pulled all the water up from the underground lake into the fountains. Was it all the fountains or was it just that one fountain? I thought it was all the fountains, if I go back and read that.
I think it was just the one that they drank from.
Okay.
That him and Matt drank from.
I thought for a second I might have caught Jordan there making a mistake, but nope.
But now there's the lake, and...
Sure. That's where all the water pressure is going.
I think we'll see in a little bit. I can't remember exactly where it appears in this chapter, but Rand mentions or observes that people are moving into Rhuidean already.
Well, sure. I mean, it's a lake of water in a desert. Like, it's going to be the only place. I mean, it's going to be like the main city in the Waste. It's going to be the only city in the Waste. It's going to be like the place that people try and go to. I mean, I imagine it's just going to be a major hub for commerce from now on.
Yeah, I always want to know what happens after, Rhuidean, after the last battle.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I imagine it becomes one of the great cities. Cairhien, Tarvalin, Rhuidean.
And then something in Shara, probably.
Yeah. Well, that's very far future.
Oh, I might have just cracked that beer right while I was talking. Oh, well.
I think as well I was talking. That was good.
Okay.
Now, this next line, right where you stopped. Too proud, he thought. A man would have to be half mad, at least to be so proud. He could not help chuckling dryly. I think that's an LTT thought.
It could be.
I mean, because this whole chapter is riddled with LTT references, with little bits of language that slips through, little bits of knowledge, and some rage and some personality. So, going back and having finished this chapter and reading through it again, I'm like, yeah, this little dry chuckle to me is very much early LTT. This sort of being like, oh, I'm going mad. And I think the reason we're hearing all this LTT, and I'm going to go off on this here for a bit, Rand is going insane, right?
Right.
I don't think anyone disputes that. The taint is affecting him. And I think the more he channels, the more taint he has to deal with. And what we saw at the end of the last book was this incredible battle between him and Asmodean when he was pulling through the Chosen Call. And so he touched more power than he's ever touched in his life, and therefore more taint than he's ever touched in his life. Way more than Kalandor. Way more.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, it's hard to quantify, but it could be more or as much power as any other male channeler might channel in their entire life.
Right.
That he channels in that evening.
And so all that power is going through him. So what I think is we've got another level of insanity here. And that level has caused what I think everyone agrees with is a seepage of information from the past life. Right? Everyone agrees that the information is correct.
Yeah.
However, I think the disagreement is whether LTT is a real person or not. And my theory has always been, look at Matt. Matt gets memories from other men, and they don't change his personality. They don't change who he is. They give him new abilities. They give him new memories, but it's not like he has trouble incorporating those memories into himself. Rand, on the other hand, takes those memories, wraps them up in an insanity, and invents a voice in his head, which is what he thinks an insane LTT would talk like. But LTT is Rand. They have the same soul. We've talked about the soul, mind, body. Rand and LTT only have one soul. LTT's mind is gone. It's not preserved in any way. It's become Rand's mind.
Right. And, that's bringing to mind, I think it was in the prologue of Fires of Heaven here, when the group of Forsaken are all sitting in a room discussing Rand, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't one of them say something along the lines of, he's not just the dragon reborn, he's the dragon, or he's not just the dragon, he's the dragon reborn. So who knows what you actually call that?
Who knows what that is, yeah.
Right, and so that implies that this is something even more rare than a dragon, that could be the same person twice. It implies that usually it isn't.
Right, but they don't know what that means, and we know that means that Rand gets the memories, I believe, of LTT. But
Yeah, in one way or another, it's what saves him. He has to go mad to save the world.
Well, he has to get the memories to save the world. I think the madness is a side effect. And then there's one theory that like, oh, well, LTT is talking to him across 3,000 years, or somehow his mind was preserved. And my counter-argument is LTT didn't die insane.
That's true.
If he somehow died and continued, he was healed by Moiraine, well, Ishmael at the time. And so there's no way that insane mind would continue forward. He would have died a sane man. There's just no way that the head LTT in Rand's head is Lews Therin Telamon. It has to be an invention of Rand's madness, and a way to frame the knowledge that's coming through here that's, really scaring him, as we'll see in a second.
Yeah, one way or another, these memories are definitely bleeding through, as we'll see in a second, like you said. And I totally agree, and I like that. I'm glad you brought up that how much power Rand just channeled in the battle over the Sa'angreal.
And that's why I think we're seeing a real level up of the insanity.
Yeah, and it gives us, like, I wanted to call it the straw that broke the camel's back, but it's more like the piano,
Yeah.
It's an incredible amount. It's not just a tipping point. It's a serious breaking point. And also, I mean, he's been doing it for a while, but if you consistently laugh at your own internal dialogue out loud, I just think that says something. People can say whatever they want, but if you just burst into laughter randomly, and you can't even justify it by having earbuds in or something, there's something going on there. I think that RJ is being really intentional. Although I think a lot of people like to deny that Rand isn't really insane until later.
Right. No, but you see him from the outside. The things he's doing are not sane.
That's not normal, man. You don't laugh at your own thoughts all the time. Maybe a little bit. Well, as we move forward, Rand's kind of looking down at a courtyard in Rhuidean. Moiraine is directing some of the peddlers and guards and workmen, the non-Aiel, to collect a bunch of the various items of power that are strewn around the courtyard. All except the redstone door frame, which they can't seem to move.
Well, they can't tilt it, so they just got to move it vertically, and that can be hard to do when you've got you're used to being able to tilt something.
Yeah, that's.
You ever try and pick up a bed mattress vertically? It's kind of hard.
Yeah.
But we know the reason she's setting this up is she's setting up for her final, basically her death scene.
Shit, good observation.
So much of what she says in this chapter is totally motivated by the fact that she knows she's about to take out. The scene in which she takes out Lanfear is about to happen. She doesn't know exactly where, but she knows it's on the carts. She knows it's with the redstone doorway. She's sort of looking around and seeing all the pieces fall into place and realizing, I ain't going to be here very much longer. One way or another,
yeah,
I am out of it.
And she got to ask her questions in Tyr. She went through the Wise One initiation.
the 3-ring ter'angreal that gives an accepted light test, which tells you some things that may happen, some things that must happen, and some things that cannot happen. And that's where Moiraine gets her 3 visions of the 3 possibilities with Lanfear. Either Lanfear is going to kill Rand, turn Rand, or Moiraine can take out Lanfear. Those are the only 3 possibilities that she saw from this point, from this nexus point, in her visit of the Wise One 3-ring ter'angreal.
Did she go through the doorframe in Rhuidean? Is there any evidence of that?
No, not as far as I know.
Yeah.
She didn't get any wishes granted, as far as we know.
Bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt's the only one who went through to see the foxes.
I'm going to skim ahead. Rand knows what the doorframe is, but he never goes through either. Also too bad.
There's so much to talk about in this chapter. What do you think about the guy who went halfway through and then Lan pulled him out?
And then he falls down on the ground and...
like, flips his shit?
Yeah, the fellow's terrified cries rose thinly to Rand, and his companion looked ready to run. I guess he's just yelling, but I sort of like to imagine that he's just kind of...
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Matt describes walking through the doorway like stepping through a sheet of light and sound, if I remember that correctly. I don't think I'm totally off. So I wonder if maybe he was like trapped in this light and sound place where he's just totally overwhelmed, or did he like fall through the doorway and have like his top half in another dimension and freak out because he saw this what was clearly another dimension? Yeah,
we'll never know. I mean, I like to think that his head went far enough through that he saw the creepy little men on the other side, and
sure.
But yeah, we don't know. It does terrify them, and Moiraine has to go and pretty much collect them after that. The workers, because they're so afraid.
Moiraine just talks to them and is like, "So, yeah, get it done." And they're like, oh, "Okay, I'm more terrified of Moiraine than I am of this doorway. That's for sure, damn sure." So she's gathering up all these ter'angreal. Certainly, she's trying to gather them up, take them back to Tarvalin. But as we know, she's also gathering them up to set up her "quote unquote" death scene. Rand talks about having already taken what he needs from the ter'angreal, which we know is the Chosen Call.
Yeah, of the Horde. He has a thought something like he took even more than he probably needed.
Yeah, well, more than he wanted anyway, in some ways, he says. Which is just so much power. He's scared of the power. He doesn't know that Kalendor has a flaw. So he believes that using that the insanity that came with Kalendor is actually also an insanity that comes with using too much power and part of having too much taint. So those things all wrap up together into this fear, not to mention Lanfear there being like, we could rule the world. We could challenge the creator. And so I think there's a healthy, maybe unhealthy amount of fear coming out of Rand for the large amount of power that he has at his disposal. But it's also right. I mean, like, Kalendor can destroy a city, the Chosen Call can destroy the world.
Yeah, I think you're right. And he's still such a novice. He doesn't know what he's doing at all, so...
No, he's just got a teacher, a couple days ago. Not that he's been doing a lot, because right now they're just waiting for all 11 clans to show up. He's only got the 6 that were there already. So he's kind of stuck just waiting, which is why he's not doing much more than practicing with the sword and how to fight.
Right. Over the next couple of pages, there's just a lot of observations and reflections. Hundreds of Aiel walk the streets, and increasing numbers actually dwelled in the buildings. And he talks about how, day after day, more and more buildings have a little garden in front of them.
Yeah. Beans or squash or zamai, which is corn. And that's one of the ways we know that usquai, which is made from zamai, is corn, is whiskey. It's corn whiskey.
Right.
We see Avendasora totally burned, which is... Again, that's one of those things that, like, that detail escaped me for a very, very long time. That Rand burned Avendasora down to the bark. And, like, because it survives, so it doesn't always look that way. But for some reason, I just never realized just how badly burned Avendasora was after the battle.
Yeah, in the moment, I remember thinking that it was dead, and what a tragedy. But there's this little line here that would be easy to miss, where Moiraine said it still lived, that it would put out shoots again. But so far, he saw only blackened bark and bare branches.
Mm-hmm. Just one of those little details that I had never. The first 50 times I read the series, I totally missed. Only on the 51st one, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It was just silly.
And then shortly after that, Rand turns around and we see his perspective of the room, and there are 6 clan chiefs laying around on the ground, or on their laying pillows. And Rand's just kind of asking them questions about what they know and the next moves that he should make. And we got a couple of paragraphs about chairs. So I moved through that. It is kind of significant where, like, there is a chair in the room, but Rand doesn't sit on it because that would imply that he was about to do certain things. But I don't know. I didn't feel like getting too into it. This is one of those
scenes where, like, so far in the show, Rand's looked out a window and then turned around.
Mm-hmm. 5 seconds.
It's like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
5 seconds. Yeah. Not a lot going on. So, but we get a lot about basically what the current status of the Aiel is. That we've got 6 clans currently in Rhuidean gathering. We were losing a lot of people to what's now called the Bleakness. I feel like every other sentence is the Aiel. The Aiel word for this is blah. It's like,
yeah, a lot of reminders and things.
A lot of reminders. A lot of like, hey, this is the culture of the Aiel. You know, you just got introduced to it. It's weird. Let's help you, bring that back up in your head.
I set a bit to read in kind of the opening dialogue. Rand is talking mainly to Rhuarc, but all the clan chiefs are chiming in, and it kind of gives us a good rundown of what's going on politically amongst the Aiel. Or a lot of it, anyway.
Sure.
"What must I do to bring rain to me?" he said, Rain being one of the clan chiefs. "You were sure they would come," Rhuarc, the chief of the Tardad, looked at him calmly. His face could have been carved from stone for all its expression. "Wait, only that. Derek will bring them, eventually." White-haired Han, lying next to Rhuarc, twisted his mouth as if about to spit. His leathery face wore a sour look, as usual. "Derek has seen too many men and maidens sit staring for days, then throw down their spears. Throw them down! And run away," Bael added quietly. "I have seen them myself, among the Goshen, even from my own sept, running. And you, Han, among the Tomanel. We all have. I do not think they know where they are running to, only what they are running from. Cowardly snakes," Jaren barked. Or Jaren. Gray streaked his light brown hair. There were no young men among the Aiel clan chiefs. Stink-adders, wriggling away from their own shadows. A slight shift of his blue eyes toward the far side of the carpet made it clear he meant it for a description of the Goshen, not just those who had thrown down their spears. Bael made as if to rise, his face hardening further, if that was possible, but the man next to him put a quieting hand on his arm. Bruan of the Nakai was big enough and strong enough for 2 blacksmiths, but he had a placid nature that seemed odd for an Aiel. "All of us have seen men and maidens run." He sounded almost lazy, and his gray eyes looked so, yet Rand knew otherwise. Even Rhuarc considered Bruan a deadly fighter and a devious tactician. Luckily, not even Rhuarc was stronger for Rand than Bruan, but he had come to follow he who comes with the dawn. He did not know Rand al'Thor. As you have, Jaren. We know how hard it was to face what they face. If you cannot name coward those who died because they could not face it, can you name coward those who run for the same reason? They should never have learned, Han muttered, kneading his red tassel blue cushion like an enemy's throat. It was for those who could enter Rhuidean and live. And Rand knows, although this Han isn't saying that directly to Rand, he is intending it for his ears. Why did you do that?
I thought the comparison from those who entered Rhuidean and died was interesting. That, like, going in, you're not a coward for going into Rhuidean and not being able to face the truth and dying, because you know that's a risk. So you must be pretty brave to face that, even if you can't come out the other side. And I think he's saying, you can't judge them for that, and you can't judge the Aiel who are running away. For it is a shameful truth, and we all have to deal with it in our own ways.
Right. It was hard to face the knowledge that what you had always believed was a lie, you see in Rand's mind. Although he only says it had to be told.
Mm-hmm. Well, if only so that he could verify that he was the Karn, as opposed to our friend Couladin, who's not. Because he did not enter the columns. He does not know the history.
No, although I think we've done some speculating that he may believe he did. Although he could just be a really good liar. It's hard to say.
We don't get a POV from him, so we don't know if he's lying to himself or actually believes the lies.
Yeah, or tricked into it somehow, compelled.
It's always nice with Aes Sedai, where, like, we know they believe the lies. It's the only way they can lie.
Right. And Rand follows up with, he's basically walks through the list of each clan and the chief of that clan, and he's asking for reports on the 7 that have not showed up. And he kind of walks all the way through, because it's, 6 that haven't showed up.
Because there's 12 clans, and we see 6 are with him.
Yeah.
One is the Shaido, and so there's 5 that are left out there.
We see him walk through, and Rhuarc and the other chiefs seem pretty certain that they're all going to come eventually, but that because of how this news has rocked their entire world and culture, and because some of these clans are so far that they're still running since, like, the last book.
Right.
They're still moving toward where Rand is.
That's a good question. How long do we think Rand's been sitting and waiting? Do we get a timeline? I didn't see a specific amount of time anywhere in this chapter.
No, but, I mean, last session when we were talking about Chapter 1, I think we roughed out that it's been approximately a month since Rand arrived in the Waste. I know that doesn't give us a ton, but
right.
Can at least know that, like, a week of traveling, a week in Rhuidean.
Okay, wait, here's a question. They met at the Golden Bowl, Chaindar.
Yeah.
And he traveled to Rhuidean at the end of the last book. But all these clans must have traveled from Chaindar to Rhuidean.
With him.
Isn't that with him? Isn't that I assume he didn't create a gateway, because we didn't see him, like, we know he's not gatewaying yet, he's still skimming, and he didn't do that thing where he got a bunch of people in the skimming platform with him. So I assume they walked. Do we know how far of a journey that is in terms of time? I don't think
it's terribly far, because aren't you supposed to run... Wait a minute.
No, that's a different spot that you run from.
Yeah.
Chaindar, I thought, was like a week's journey.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And we just see various members of various clans just starting to camp in the mountains around Rhuidean and even in Rhuidean itself. So I guess, I mean, I would assume that the people follow their chiefs, and at least these handful of chiefs follow Rand.
Yeah.
Although we know some people stay behind, a majority of their warriors are assembling, but I assume not even all of them. You wouldn't bring every last one if you're planning on moving.
I thought the entire clan moved. Maybe they just had the warriors with them at Chaindar, but aren't the whole clan gathering in Rhuidean? It's kind of what I assumed.
Oh, I don't know. I would think that would be too many to feed. I can't think of anything any line or anything in particular to strike down that they don't all move. I just assume that they would leave at least some behind to guard, their land or territory, and farmers or blacksmiths or whatever.
Don't the wise ones have the prophecies that are basically like, you have to cross the dragon wall or else you'll be, consigned to history, that sort of thing? I mean, I guess people stay behind in Rhuidean. Rhuidean becomes a major city, so it's, I guess, not everybody crosses. And I'm having thoughts, conflicting thoughts.
Yeah. And of course, last but not least, Rand moves on to news of Couladin and the Shaido.
Even if they're just one clan, but they are growing because of all the people who are flocking to them, because they don't believe that Rand is the Dragon Reborn. So even though they're like 1/12th, weren't they the biggest clan to begin with? And then they get a bunch of sort of brotherless, as they end up being called.
Oh, the Shaido, yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine that they get pretty damn big for one of the clans. I imagine they're the size of any 2 or 3 other clans put together.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that, at least because I think this might be coming up, or we may have passed it. But one of the clan chiefs notes that... Oh, I think it's coming up. One of the clan chiefs notes that, yeah, the only reason Couladin hasn't moved against us is because, although he's making all kinds of excuses, is because he knows that there are enough warriors here to kill each of his warriors twice. Which, considering the Shaido's only one clan and there's 6, says that...
it's a big clan.
Yeah.
They've always been a big clan.
They're much bigger for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's quality over quantity, right? They went for quantity, and their quality sucks.
Is there any hope that Couladin will meet with me? Rand knew there was not. He had stopped sending requests for a meeting once he learned Couladin was having the messengers skinned alive. But it was a way to start the others talking. Hans snorted. The only word we have had from him is that he means to flay you when he next sees you. Does that sound as if he will talk? Can I break the Shaido away from him? They follow him, Rhuarc said. He's not a chief at all, but they believe he is. Couladin had never entered the glass columns. He might even still believe, as he claimed, that everything Rand had said was a lie. He says that he is the Kara Karn, and they believe that as well. The Shaido maidens who came for their society, and that because the Fardar Asmai carried your honor. None else will. We send scouts to watch them, Bruan said, and the Shaido kill them when they can. Couladin builds the makings of half a dozen feuds, but so far he shows no signs of attacking us here. I have heard that he claims we have defiled Rhuidean, and that attacking us here would only deepen the desecration. Aram grunted and shifted on his cushion. What he means is that there are enough spears here to kill every Shaido twice over, and to spare. He popped a piece of white cheese into his mouth, growling around it. The Shaido were ever cowards and thieves. Honorless dogs, Bael and Geron said together, and they stared at one another as though each thought the other had tricked him into something. Honorless or not, Ruan said quietly, Couladin's numbers are growing. Calm as he sounded, he still took a deep drink from his goblet before going on. You all know what I am speaking of. Some of those who run, after the bleakness, do not throw away their spears. Instead, they join with their societies among the Shaido. No Tomanel has ever broken clan, Han barked. Bruan looked past Rhuarc and Aram at the Tomanel chief and said deliberately, It has happened in every clan. Without waiting for another challenge to his word, he settled back on his cushion. It cannot be called breaking clan. They join their societies, like the Shaido maidens who have come to their roof here. There were a few mutters, but no one disputed him this time. The rules governing Aiel warrior societies were complex, and in some ways, their members felt as closely bound to society as to clan. For instance, members of the same society would not fight each other, even if their clans were in blood feud. Some men would not marry a woman too closely related to a member of their own society, just as if that made her their own close bloodkin. The ways of Fardar Asmai, the maidens of the spear, Rand did not even want to think about. And I interpreted that last line just as it's even more complicated than a regular warrior society.
Well, women are always more complicated in this book. Always.
With all that, we just can pick up from that paragraph, and then what we know about how Maidens of the Spear have even more complex rules about marriage and who you can and can't sleep with, when, how, and why, whatever.
Yeah.
It's all really complicated.
It's really complicated, and I don't think we ever really get enough information to fully suss out all the rules, just that, we know there are a ton of weird rules.
Yeah. We know we don't know.
Mm-hmm. I like how Rand asks, so can we send a spy back to them? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
You sure? Anyone
so
who would less honor?
In theory, it's a good idea. It's just the Aiel chiefs won't accept the idea that, Rand's idea is that these brotherless, they haven't earned the name yet, but that's what they'll eventually be called, go join their societies amongst the Shaido. And he was like, what if a couple of our people went and joined their societies amongst the Shaido? And they seem...
shocked.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the wise ones are like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Let's do it.
No, it's a terrible idea.
The wise ones do that kind of stuff all the time. But it's not spying. It's just...
It's not spying if you say that you're looking.
Exactly.
I think is what the wise ones' kind of logic is. Yeah, we're here. Of course we're observing.
We're watching you. I'm watching everything you're doing, Patrick, on this camera.
That's not spying.
I can see you.
Rand asks about any word beyond the dragon wall. No. We see all the clan chiefs kind of collectively refer to the Kyrienans as the tree killers. And boy, do they have some mean things to say.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I like the little back and forth between Bael and Jaren. These two sort of clan chiefs who used to have a blood feud, and they keep trying to say the same thing and then getting pissed at each other because they agree on everything.
Right.
And they want to be enemies. And I feel like there's a similar dynamic with the two women with Egwene in the little white tower when they're constantly trying to undercut each other, and she uses that. I can't remember their names. Yeah. So those two, there's sort of a similar dynamic here where it's they're both there to support Rand or Egwene, but they hate each other and they're constantly sniping at each other, but because they're supporting the same person, they agree on a lot of stuff, so they kind of get pissed at each other while they're doing it.
Pookie says Lilane and Ramonda?
Thank you.
I think that's right.
So I see Bael and Jiren as Lilane and Ramonda.
Yeah, and they're two good, honorable men. A lot of the reason I wanted to read a couple of those clips is because it shows all the tensions, even within Rand's inner circle. Some of these guys want to kill each other. They're just not because they've all mutually agreed that while they're doing this, they won't. But once everything's over, maybe.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the Peace of Rhuidean as well going on, because they are technically in Rhuidean.
Yeah.
So he's hoping that that's going to hold. We get a Shara name drop here, which, again, we don't learn much information about Shara, but...
Yeah.
The idea that it exists, at least.
Man, and yeah, that's kind of the brutal talk of the tree killers I was talking about. Bael says, you should have let the tree killers starve. And rather than feed them, like Rand sent them food from Tyr.
Totally.
And Aram says, tree killers are fit for nothing except to be killed or sold as animals in Shara, which I think is the name drop you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Which is just really, they're like, look at Kyrianans as less than human.
Well, because they have no honor. That's the whole, with the destruction of Alviandadoral, okay, close enough. With Layman's Sin, they really are like, listen, we were, that's the thing is like, what is it, best friends become the worst enemies type thing? Like, the Kyrians were the water sharers. They were the ones who helped out the Aiel. They were the best of the wetlanders. And that's why the Aiel gave them a cutting from Avendasora.
But they turned their back on that agreement in the eyes of the Aiel.
Right, and so that's an oath betrayed is even worse than just being a stupid wetlander. And that goes back to the whole, why the Aiel are broken, because they essentially betrayed the Way of the Leaf.
Right.
And their dedication to peace. They've completely lost that. They betrayed their oath. And so in a lot of ways they are worse than the despised Kyrianan.
Well, it makes sense, like after a shitty breakup, some love makes for the best hate. I'm not saying this well, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. Well, strong feelings are strong feelings, If you're indifferent to somebody, you're just indifferent. You're probably never not going to hate them. But if you love somebody and then they fuck you, and not the good way.
Yeah. They went through a bad breakup, those two.
Yeah,
hate each other.
They hate each other. They do not get along. All their mutual friends try not to talk about it. Keep them in separate continents,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Moiraine and Egwene arrive at the end here, Rand sums it up. You know what must be done. Bring in the rest of the clans and keep an eye on the Shaido. He paused a moment, then added, It will end well, as well for the Aiel as I can manage. The prophecy said you would break us, Han said sourly, and you have made a good beginning, but we will follow you. Till shade is gone, he recited, till water is gone, into the shadow with teeth bared, screaming defiance with the last breath, to spit in Sightblinder's eye, on the last day. There's nothing
I want that written on my tombstone.
There was nothing for Rand except to make the proper response, once he had known it. By my honor and the light, my life will be a dagger for Sightblinder's heart, until the last day, the Aiel finished, to Shale Ghul itself.
The harper played on. As we have Asmodean, I know they don't say it's Asmodean, but it's the harper sort of playing in the background, always sort of commenting on what Rand says. I'm going off quite a bit on this chapter. There's a lot for me to talk about in this one. This is a fun chapter. I'm really enjoying this one. This is because it's a lot of talking and thinking and internal dialogue of Rand. I get less excited about the action scenes. I think I've talked about this before, where I feel like the action scenes are like, yep, that happened. Whereas like stuff like this, you get to like really dig into what the sentences mean and what he's trying to imply and what's actually going on versus what the characters know is going on. This is my favorite stuff. I think I really like early book setup a lot, and then sort of mid-book politics. End of book action, it's fun to read, but it's less fun to podcast about. The next page, I have almost nothing, because it's like a description of Moiraine and Egwene.
Oh, yeah. I kind of found it interesting as a side note that Rand is thinking about trying to talk the Aiel into bringing a bunch of mass-produced cotton products over the Dragon Wall because they'll be so valuable. Nobody knows what cotton is.
Yeah, I'll go. They're like, we're stuck with wool. We want some cotton. Like, all we have is itchy, scratchy wool. This cotton's amazing. Algode, as they call it. Which isn't that a Spanish word for cotton?
I believe that's right. I think it's Spanish,
or pretty close to it, yeah. I feel like a lot of the Aiel words, like Zumai and stuff like that, are Spanish-derived. Jordan took those words. The Romance language derived, at least. Took the basic Romance language and then twisted it.
Yeah. The next thing I have really is when Rand says, "What do you want of me?" to Moiraine. And they had been kind of discussing the wagons, and Moiraine is kind of pretending to ask him permission to do things, which Rand isn't buying.
Yep. Is that before or after he gets smacked with a hickory stick made of sardine? After, yeah. So that's Moiraine that smacked him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, he can't figure out who it is, and there's a whole little back and forth where, like, Egwene gives away that it wasn't her, so he figures out it's Moiraine. And Egwene, like, punishes herself for, like, screwing that one up. It's one of those fun little, like, they're playing the game of houses with each other.
Yeah.
And going back and comparing this scene with the three of them to, like, Eye of the World, Egwene, Rand, and Moiraine is like, oh, they've come so far. From their innocent little children to, like, subtly manipulating each other with nods and shakes of heads and glances to the side.
But I thought this little clip was important when Rand says, "What do you want of me?" His voice sounded flat and cold to his own ears, and the power stormed inside of him. And then he says, "And don't mention wagons again, little sister. I usually find out what you mean to do long after it's done." The Aes Sedai frowned at him, and no wonder. She was surely not used to being addressed so, not by any man, even the Dragon Reborn. He had no idea himself where little sister had come from. Sometimes of late words seemed to pop into his head, a touch of madness, perhaps. Some nights he lay awake till the small hours, worrying about that. Inside the void, it seemed someone else's worry.
Little sister is clearly what LTT called other Aes Sedai in the Age of Legends.
Because he would have been highest. So I suppose, I'm making assumptions, of course, if LTT at the end of his life referred to a woman as sister, she would probably have been the equivalent to, or I guess he was highest, right? So he was...
Or even in like an accepted level, like a sister in training would be a little sister, something like that. Right,
but there was the governing body that was like above the Aes Sedai in the Age of Legends, of which LTT was the head,
He was the Tamerlane.
Right, kind of like
he wore the ring of the Tamerlane, yeah.
So everybody would have been below him.
So like, in a lot of ways, like the Amyrlin describes other women as daughter.
Right, so rather than little sister, which implies that you're kind of on the same level, you're just a little above that, you know? Mm-hmm. It's not daughter, it's little sister.
There's also a line right above that. "I will do nothing without proof. I will not be goaded this time." You know what I think that is?
No, what is he? I mean, I know he's...
about LTT, who got goaded into sealing the bore without the help of the women.
Oh.
So I think that's, again, LTT saying, this time, this life, I won't screw it up. I won't be goaded into doing something foolish, like sealing the bore.
Well, it's kind of funny because all of LTT's thoughts here, and I'm glad you pointed that out because it is in italics, which sometimes Rand's thoughts are, but he's thinking about, he says something rude, gets smacked in the back with a rod of air, doesn't know which woman does it, but he fills himself with the power because he's angry in a second.
Yeah.
And then he's thinking about which one he should hit back, and then he doesn't do it. And he has that thought, which appears to apply, but "I will not be goaded, this time" implies that he's thinking of some other time, which there wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, and you could say that maybe, I mean, obviously Egwene and Moiraine have probably antagonized him more than a handful of times. So maybe he's referring to a previous antagonistic moment that he did something with the power. But because of all the LTT references in this chapter, I'm convinced that's an LTT reference to being goaded into sealing up the bore. Because he's like, I screwed up. That was not, I need cooperation this time. That's where I messed up last time. I need everyone to work together.
I like it.
Oh, and Pookie the Penguin is saying that he or she thinks one of the Forsaken refers to the Black Oddjaw as a little sister as well. So that would be more proof that it's a Age of Legends type reference to someone who's lesser but still
I hope that's
channeler.
true. Yeah, like a inducted channeler who's not yet fully trained, perhaps, or not at the same rank as the person above them.
Right. I also think this is one of the best descriptions of a Gleeman's cloak right here.
Oh yeah, I noticed that too. I thought you would like that.
Yeah. Well, because that's definitely probably one of the main descriptions that even though my Gleeman's cloak is based on Tom's cloak more so, but this is the better description, I think, in terms of like what the patches actually do, the way they flutter in the slightest breeze, that they're not just sewn on flat. There's actually, they're sewn on so that they flutter, so that there is this perception of movement. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't just want to have the colors, you also want to have the movement, so you want to have this fluttering.
Yeah, it seemed like that was very intentional to make sure you don't think, because Rand even thinks, what was it, that although it was covered in patches, it was a perfectly good cloak. The patches were simply sewn on to flutter at the slightest breeze.
Well, and that's possibly something that's a little different about Natail. He talks about how arrogant he is and the fact that his clothes are silk, as no traveling Gleeman would ever have silk clothing.
Yeah.
And he's got a really nice cloak. This is the thing, like, our two examples of Gleeman in this story are a Court Bard and a Forsaken, both of which have really nice cloaks with patches sewn on.
Right.
But that might not be the standard. Most Gleeman, I'm guessing, have shitty cloaks and just sew the patches on to keep them from leaking.
At least in part because they live on the road.
Yeah, and then it just becomes a symbol of the office and sort of two functions. And I'll tell you what, having a Gleeman's cloak, that son of a bitch is comfortable.
I bet. I think about that sometimes. A nice hooded cloak seems like such a sensible garment. I've probably gone off about this on the show before.
I think we have, yeah.
I do in regular life, too. Seems like such a sensible garment, but we don't wear them. Why?
Honestly, that really should be the tagline for this episode. We've had this conversation before. Or for this podcast, I mean.
Moiraine asks Rand to send away the Gleeman, and Rand's like, nah, you can just say whatever you want in front of him. Which, seems perfectly sensible to me. I mean, it's not like the guy isn't going anywhere. He has nowhere to go. Doesn't matter what he knows.
Yeah, and I guess Rand is really basically saying, well, you're all in.
Yeah.
And I would hesitate to give him all the details just because I feel like if you give him the wrong piece of information, maybe he can use that to get back into the Dark One's good graces.
Perhaps. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if that was the smartest move, but, he's going with it.
After another tense page of kind of rude exchanges between the three, Rand is finally like, really, what are you actually here for? Because I doubt it's report... I doubt it's actually to report what you've been up to, like as if you ever cared to tell me before. So, tell me, really, why are you here? And Moiraine takes a cloth-wrapped disc out of her pouch and shaves a slice off of it with a knife, and it's one of the seals on the Dark One's prison.
Yeah, so this is the transition. Any idea why the seals go from being indestructible to being destructible? This doesn't appear to be any single event that switches them over.
Oh, no. I just assume it has to do with the Dark One kind of touching the Dark One touching the seals from the other side, if that makes any sense. And that the only thing that could injure these things is the true power.
And that's where I have to bring up something that was said in Robert Jordan's notes at JordanCon, which is, we pretty much always made the assumption that the true power over time erodes the Dark One seals to destroy Quendiar. And mostly because, the true power is used to destroy the Quendiar sad bracelets.
Right.
But based on Robert Jordan's notes, he did say that the weakening of the seals was not, in fact, due to the Dark One touching them with the true power from the inside. He could not reach them. It was, in fact, men doing evil deeds on the outside that was slowly allowing the corruption of the seals. And that if men had stayed good and had continued to do good things and not hurt each other and not done evil deeds, that the seals would have been good forever.
That's interesting.
Now, it's a reading of Robert Jordan's notes. It's not really in the books, secondhand information, all that kind of jazz. But that's, I just wanted to put that out there because I know people have argued with my idea that it's, or argue with the idea that it's the dark, not my idea, but the idea that it's the Dark One's taint, just based on Robert Jordan's notes. So I had a few conversations about that at the con.
That is interesting. I didn't know that. I had a passing thought while I was reading this earlier that, okay, so I guess what I was wondering is, we know LTT goes to the boar, companions, all that, seals it, there's a backstroke, and that power makes a bunch of men go mad. I guess what I was thinking about is the Dark One just the true power? Are they kind of one and the same? Right? Yes. Is it just kind of an extension of himself?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's sort of...
If so, and that's what I always thought. I always thought that the true power is the Dark One. He's just kind of lending his body for a time, and which is power. His body is a kind of power.
Yeah, that's really what it is like, where do you separate those two? Right.
And if that's the case, so I'm extrapolating pretty far now, but if that's the case, that the true power is the Dark One, did that backstroke mean that a little piece of the Dark One is still in the world for the whole time? You know what I mean? Is that where some things come from? I don't know. Passing thought. Throwing it out there.
When the Dark One is fully sealed away, mankind forgets violence, eventually.
Right.
That did not happen when LTT sealed the boar. So,
kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah. And and Ishmael was out. He was only partially sealed. He got to pop out every once in a while. So clearly the Dark One had some influence through that. Like, there's no doubt that the Dark One was still around.
Right, and again, so if that's all the case, is that why when Rand seals the boar later, does he have to leave a little piece of the Dark One out in the world in order to maintain neutrality?
I think by not killing the Dark One and sealing him up, he allows the potential of opening up the boar again. So mankind has the potential to be evil if we make those choices. And that's where we can be evil, independent of the Dark One. That's the whole point of Shadow Logoth.
Yeah. And eventually people will just forget, you know?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we found something, and just not know that somebody already found this.
So we know there are 4 existing. We've seen 3 broken discs. 1 will break, but hasn't broken yet. I think it just breaks in transit. And then 3 last until the last battle.
Yes, Moiraine says this one she found in Rhuidean that she's showing to Rand, and also the one that they found in Tyr is in similar shape, she says. It's still holding together, but she says if this fell off a table, it won't. So just think on that, I guess is what she's saying. We're in a precarious place. And of course, after that, it's probably her setup saying, like, look, we're in a really precarious place, so what are your plans, man? What are you going to do? And then Rand gets all stubborn again. He's like, why do you need to know?
Because she's not going to be around much longer.
That's, of course, she's not sharing that either, which is one of the infuriating things about this section of the series and a lot of the series in general, is just that people not listening to or trusting each other. If they did, they'd move a lot faster, make a lot more progress.
Yeah, I'm not sure that she can actually share that with him for various reasons, but this line, eventually, Moiraine replied quietly, eventually I will have to leave you. After all, what will be, must be.
Ooh, yeah.
Direct reference to taking out Lanfear at the end of this book.
What will be, must be.
Eventually I will have to leave you.
And then she shivers.
Doesn't want to. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the next instant, she was all composure and self-control once more. What could upset her more than her own death? Or her own, basically, long
slow torture.
Long, slow torture and bleeding out of her channeling ability. And there's a couple other there's a few more references as we go through to that I want to bring up. But yeah, he's like, oh, she's just messing with me. She's not actually worried. She's just pretending so that I'll pay attention to her if I'm anxious about her leaving.
Yeah. They're just kind of not quite yelling at each other, but forcefully talking to each other. Rand says, well, what do you have me do? Hunt down the Forsaken one by one? She's like, yeah, you probably could, but you left Kalendor behind, you dummy. And it just goes on like that.
Of course, she doesn't know he's got the Chosen Call, and the Kalendor is almost irrelevant.
Right.
In terms of power level.
She does give him a bunch of compliments. Establishing order in Kyria and feeding the hungry is laudable. Another time I'd praise you for it, but it doesn't help you win the last battle.
Whatever you say before the but doesn't count.
Well, which I don't think that's true. I think she's wrong there. I think that she believes that, of course.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, hundreds of thousands or millions of people not starving to death seems pretty important to winning the last battle.
I have to wonder if maybe he'd followed her plan. He might have had more of the Westlands united, and then they would have been able to resist the Shan-Chan, and the Shan-Chan would have been less of an issue. Or maybe he could have gotten the Shan-Chan on his side early on and then had to fight the Aiel. That would have been an interesting take on things. What if at Falma he sort of, like, killed Torak? And then from there he was like, I'm the new leader of the Shan-Chan now. You know, like, that would have been a cool place to get an army. An alternate timeline where Rand starts off with the army of the Returned at his back, and that's how he takes over Randland from the west and totally ignores the Aiel.
That is interesting.
Just an interesting alternate timeline that I'm thinking about right now.
The Aiel are my favorite, though.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well,
although the Shan-Chan are really interesting, and I would have liked to have seen more of them. Rand makes a decent point when Moiraine's like, you're spending all this time here with the Aiel, but how is that going to help? You know, and he says, yeah, well, look at what happened during the Aiel War. That was 4 clans. What happens if I bring 11?
Well, first of all, it's only portions of the 11, and second of all, you actually have to fight one of the other clans, the 12th clan, so it's a little bit of a wash. It's not quite a slam dunk the way he thinks it is. But, yeah, the Aiel are an incredible fighting force, and he has a lot of them. Did you notice the other LTT reference there?
Oh, right. Rand says that 4 clans did that. What will happen if I lead 11 across the spine of the world? By the time the nations even think of uniting, it will be too late. They'll accept my peace, or I'll be buried in Canbriat. A discordant plunk rose from the harp, and Aiel bent over the instrument, shaking his head. In a moment, the soothing sounds came again.
And we learn in a bit that Rand has no idea what Canbriat is. That's an LTT reference to something from the Age of Legends that clearly Asmodean recognized that reference. And like it threw him. He's like, what? How? There's no way that a farmer from Andor would know that name. But LTT does. Right.
And from context, we can tell what it means. It just means, like, or hell will freeze over, essentially. That this could never happen. But Aiel, or rather, Asmodean knows exactly what it means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just love that. There's just so much LTT in this chapter. These little bits of information that are coming across. And that discordant plunk is totally a huge reaction in Jordan terms. Huge.
Yeah. The next thing that I have here is when Rand says... Oh, Moiraine's saying that basically you might be bringing all these Aiel over the Dragon Wall to unite the Westlands, but, you know, when you engage them in combat, you're only going to piss them off, is what she's implying. And if we move correctly here, by the time we get there, the Amyrlin seat may have all of the, or many of the nations listening to her. If she can provide proof that the dragon has been reborn, then some of these leaders might come over. And Rand's response is, right, and, you know, that's probably not true. But
considering she's been stilled and deposed?
Oh, well, certainly not true. But from Moiraine's perspective, she doesn't know that happened.
No, she has no idea. And it's funny that Moiraine is so very wrong here.
And Rand says some cutting things here, but also really accurate when he's I feel like he's right on when he says, so you and Swan Sanche still think you know everything there is to know. And he has the thought, the light willing, they did not know near everything about him and would never find out. And then he says, you're both fools. And Egwene just yells at him, show some respect. But he's absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neither Moiraine nor Swan know everything, and they certainly don't know everything about what he's doing. We saw that with the comment about Kalendor. Rand has something way better than Kalendor.
And their plans never worked, right? I mean, their plan was to get Rand to the White Tower. That was Moraine's initial plan.
That's a dumb idea.
That's a dumb idea.
That would never have gone over well.
Put it to Therin in the White Tower? Not a good idea. Saw how that worked out with Matt? Not good.
And then, of course, not only does he have the Choden Call, but he has one of the only living male channelers who can teach him to do anything as his teacher. And then that's what he means when he's saying, like, hopefully they'll never find out about that. And then he says, you're both fools. And he means you're both fools for thinking you know everything, that you know how to do this. Nobody knows how to do this.
And I'm the one who's prophesized. I'm the only one who the prophecies say can do it. So stop telling me what to do because you can't do it. I can. Only I can. Is sort of what I imagine he's thinking.
Be a good little sister and run an assist. That's what he's saying.
There's one throw-off line where he says, "This is so it was you." He snapped, and he's talking to Egwene, And she half shook her head, which is the little bit of information that we get to figure out that it's Moiraine.
Mm-hmm.
And then the line, if the Aes Sedai was showing that much temper, something must be wearing at her terribly. Him, no doubt.
Nope.
You're totally wrong, Rand. It's her own impending doom.
It's not about you, dude.
It's not about you. Sometimes it's not about the Dragon Reborn. You think it always is. A lot of times it's not. This time it's about her. I mean, it is about you because she dies for you, but that's all different. It's about her death, not your being a pain in the butt.
Yeah, although both are true. Rand is a pain in the ass.
Yes.
And these, I know I said it already, but these scenes always frustrate me so much because Moiraine does have a lot to offer, and Rand doesn't know everything either. Nobody does. They need to work together, not have this contentious garbage.
Yeah, but they're both keeping secrets, right? Rand is keeping Jason Natel a secret, and she's keeping this sort of fated event a secret.
Yeah.
And they're both talking around that to each other. So she figures his secret out way before. I think she figures out who Jason Natel is almost immediately. I'll have to keep a lookout for exactly when she reveals that knowledge, because I think there is a spot where she before she writes the letter to Rand telling him she knows.
Yeah, and I mean, I wonder if she knew about Lanfear as well without the help of the answered questions from the...
I think one of the questions might have been... Well, they weren't that wasn't the question. That was just the vision through the doorways.
Oh, right.
But I do think she knew... I mean, she talks about Lanfear coming after LTT and being in love with him a lot. I think after the Great Hunt.
I'm going to assume she knows. Or she knows that something is happening.
Yeah. Just another LTT reference there with Ileana. Where he doesn't even know who Ileana is at this point. He doesn't even know that's Lews Therin's dead wife.
Yeah. And for context, Rand and Moiraine have their argument, heated conversation, whatever, and then Elaine is just flaying him with her tongue. Just basically just being like, you are so damn rude, I don't care if you're the chief of chiefs and the Dragon Reborn, you are a jerk, is what you are. And she's going on. And then Rand has the thought, Ileana never flashed her temper at me when she was angry with herself. When she gave me the rough side of her tongue, it was because his mind froze for an instant. He had never met a woman named Ileana in his life, but he could summon up a face for the name, dimly. A pretty face, skin like cream, golden hair exactly the shade of Elaine's. This had to be madness. Remembering an imaginary woman, perhaps one day he would find himself having conversations with people who were not there. Egwene's harangue. Yeah. Egwene's harangue shut off with a concerned look. Are you all right, Rand? The anger was gone from her voice as if it had never been. Is something wrong? Should I fetch Moiraine back to... No, he said, just as quickly, softened his own tone. She can heal...
Madness.
Even Aes Sedai could not heal madness. None of them could heal any of what ailed him. Is Elaine well? She is well. Despite what Egwene had said, there was a hint of sympathy in her voice. That was all he really expected. Beyond what he had known when Elaine left Tyr, what she was up to was an Aes Sedai concern and none of his. So Egwene had told him more than once, and Moiraine echoed her. The three wise ones could dream walk. Those Egwene was studying with had been even less informative. They had their own reasons not to be pleased with him. I had best go too, Egwene went on, settling her shawl over her arms. You were tired. Frowning slightly, she said, Rand, what does it mean to be buried in Canbriat? He started to ask what under the light she was talking about. Then he remembered using the phrase. Just something I heard once, he lied. He had no more idea what it meant than where it had come from. You rest, Rand, she said, sounding 20 years older rather than 2 younger. Promise me you will. You need it. He nodded. She studied his face for a moment, as though searching for the truth, then started for the door. Rand's silver goblet of wine floated up from the carpet and drifted to him. He hastily snatched it out of the air before Egwene looked back over her shoulder. Perhaps I shouldn't tell you this, she said. Elaine didn't give it to me as a message for you, but she said she loves you. Perhaps you know already, but if you don't, you should think about it. With that, she was gone, the beads clicking together behind her. Leaping from the table, Rand hurled the goblet away, splashing wine across the floor tiles as he rounded on Jason Natail in a fury.
And that last line doesn't make any sense until you realize that Jason Natail was the one who floated in the goblet.
Rand released the power like a minute ago.
Totally.
So the next chapter opens with him screaming at Asmodean, saying, like,
so what the hell are you doing? And Asmodean's like, she would have thought it was you.
I told
you
like, never to channel without my permission. Yeah.
Now, Asmodean definitely seems the type to ask forgiveness, not permission.
I'm sure all the Forsaken are a little bit like that.
Yeah, they don't ask permission to do pretty much anything.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?